You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. This morning, the topic is development. Not only building up what is already available, but creating whole new sets of possibilities. The second half of the program will focus on biotech. For most of us, biotech remains a somewhat mysterious topic that raises more questions than answers. But for civic leaders, including Governor Taft, biotech holds out the promise to produce a host of new jobs that will drive the future economy. The first half of the program focuses on the Banks Project, a brick-and-mortar development effort that seems easier to understand, but has its own set of complexities and mysteries. Since the plans were first unveiled almost 2 years ago, the Port Authority has been reorganized to manage this huge project. Several months ago, the Port Authority issued a request for qualifications, an RFQ, inviting developers to form teams that had the track record necessary to take on this project. That field has been narrowed to 3 finalists who are now preparing more detailed proposals to move forward. To discuss where this process stands at the close of 2001, I am joined this morning by Jack Rouse, the chair of the Port Authority. Jack, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Hey, good to see you, Dan.
Let's start not at all the pretty pictures, but
No.
literally at the foundation, which we keep saying we got to start with, and that's the garages.
Yes, sir.
And the issue about the garages is funding. Where do we stand with funding the garages that lifts everything on the banks out of the floodplain? Where do we stand with that process?
As you know, the Riverfront Advisors, the Port Authority, I keep calling this by our old name, issued a report and suggested one approach would be to get local financial institutions, and of course First Star came forth as the lead bank, joined by people.
Let's back up a little bit. The problem with, why we need that is because, first off, this is expensive. How expensive is it to do the garages?
Oh, the garages are $60 million and change somewhere.
Okay,
in there.
$60 million and change. And is the problem with the $60 million and change in part, to some extent, the downturn in the economy?
Exclusively. As Todd Portune said in a recent letter to Charlie Lucan, the county stands behind their commitment, to fund the parking, which forms the foundation of the banks. It's all about timing. I mean, had the economy not done what it did, and of course Cincinnati's not unique, the economy all over the world has done this. So the issue became, is there a way to get the banks moving in advance of all of those tax revenues coming back? And that's where some of the local financial institutions.
And the hope originally was it was that half-cent sales tax that would generate the funding for the public investment. Part
exactly.
Of that being the garages. And as the economy went down, sales tax revenues went down, right?
Sure. So what do you do? It's a classic development problem. Can you find a way to bridge that gap until the revenues come back, which historically...
And now, what's your proposal for bridging that gap? I think that's where we were.
The proposal for bridging the gap was 2 local financial institutions, First Star, was joined by PNC, said they would make, essentially, let's be simple, the bridge loan available until that time, no sunset on this, as the sales taxes came back. The county looked at that, appreciated our efforts. They have responded with some questions about it, which are all appropriate, and some maybe alternate approaches to bridging the gap. As we know, this is on Friday, and we're taping this, and this afternoon we have our first meeting with the county to start to try to bring these two different approaches together, and I'm confident we will.
And you received a letter from the commissioners yesterday on Thursday, or I don't know.
Sure.
It was reported
this
morning in the newspaper.
It was yesterday, yeah.
And was that in direct response? I haven't seen the original letter. I've only seen the report about it. Was that in direct response to this proposal about having First Star, PNC, the private banks give this, step in with this bridge loan?
Yeah.
And was that, or is the right way to read that response that we're not so interested in that, we're interested in getting the state, federal, and city dollars involved in this?
Well, embedded in our proposal were state dollars from the State Infrastructure Bank. I mean, only $38 million was coming from the private institutions. The other was coming from the SIB. And so, yes, it was in direct response to that. And I don't think it's a question so much of no, we want to try to find the money somewhere else because we don't have the responsibility. It's, are there other ways to find the money that may be less expensive in the long run in terms of interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, they're perfectly legitimate questions, and, development is enormously complicated, and, there's not just one way to do it, clearly. And, our goal now is simply to work with the county and the city and figure out how do we make this work.
Another thing about that response, as I read the report about that, is that Todd Portune was trying to say that an element of the bank's project that maybe he feels isn't getting enough attention is this Central Riverfront Park, and that needs to be a priority, or maybe in his mind, the priority. Is that what Todd's saying, and where did we stand with the park?
Sure. Todd's absolutely right. The advisors, back when we were the advisors, had always maintained that this was a medium density development. It was an urban neighborhood in a park. In fact, as I've said rather flippantly many times, if you look at the original rendering, there's more green magic marker on it than there is any other color. That was confirmed when the developers responded to the RFQ, because there were only two things they were really concerned about. One was the parking and the other was the park. Because park and green spaces drive real estate values. They are what make it attractive. This was something that was missed in the 60s and the 70s.
Well, it's clear why the parking drives it, because you got to, those are in effect the foundation for the buildings.
Sure.
Why does the park drive?
Quality of life. Quality of life, and the realization that more and more people, since we have options of where we locate our businesses and our residences, would rather locate in places that are pleasant as opposed to places that are packed every inch with brick and mortar. So it's a viable part of economic development because it does tend to drive real estate values, but it's also very important in terms of what it gives back to the public. I mean, Todd has said many times, and he's absolutely right, the park is the major portion of that bank's issue that really is for everyone. Everyone won't live there, everyone won't work there, everyone doesn't go to the football or the baseball or First Star or the Freedom Center, but everyone can use the park. And to that extent, the public investment in that probably is more important than anything, purely from a public investment standpoint.
And that's estimated at about $78 million?
There have been a lot of estimates, but yeah, currently that's what's being carried, I think.
And where do we stand with that?
Well, the park initiative up to this point has been in the hands of the park department. And we worked with them as the riverfront advisors, but I think that what's probably going to happen is there's going to be a more concerted effort and a more determined approach to figure out how to get this done. Since it's become very apparent that it is not a park and the bank's development, but a bank's development within a park, those things really have to proceed together. And frankly, if we look at it together, it just may be that there's some cost savings there too. I mean, clearly when you do something as a totality, it's less expensive and less cumbersome than doing it as in pieces.
Okay, I want to move forward to the development teams, and I want to clarify who they are. Let's review the three finalist teams. All are made up of 6 to 11 companies that include architects, construction management firms, legal and financial advisors, and all are led by 2 development companies, a primary and a secondary. The first team, the Lincoln Property Company of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, leads the first team. Lincoln has developed 170,000 multifamily units and 103 million square feet of commercial space. Lincoln has experience in Tampa Bay of working with a port authority. Partnering with Lincoln is the Phoenix Property Company of Dallas, Texas, an apartment developer already active in the Cincinnati market. The second team is led by Cincinnati-based Madison Marquette. They have a track record with retail centers in Tampa, revitalizing Seattle's landmark 601 Pine Street, and a new lifestyle village, whatever the heck that is, in Palm Desert. They have partnered with JPI, which focuses on multifamily developments. The third team is headed by the Staubach Company out of Washington, D.C. They're known for mixed-use development. Newtown near Williamsburg, Virginia, and the renovation of Penn Station in New York. Staubach has partnered with Cincinnati-based Town Properties, which of course is known for the development on Mount Adams out in Landon and downtown housing at Garfield, Greenwich, and the Shiloh Lofts. Jack, these are the 3. How many did you have actually submit?
I think there were 13 submittals and 1 or 2 withdrawals. We were so excited, and still are, by the submissions. I mean, these are quality players. These are people who've done.
Any development firm that you had hoped would submit that did not, because they just took a look at the project and said, Nope, not even interested?
Not to my, I was not on the RFQ committee, that was a subdivision of the port, but no, I don't think so. I mean, these were a lot of people that we had hoped would submit.
Okay.
And they're people who have track records in doing this kind of thing.
One of the issues about development on the riverfront is the whole question of inclusiveness, of diversity, of, in the 3 finalist firms, how important is that in the qualifications? I understand you weren't on that selection committee.
First of all, it is absolutely imperative. We will not work with developers on this project who do not have a very aggressive plan for economic inclusion. It was stated in the Riverfront Advisors Report, it was stated in the RFQ. All of these companies have minority, whether that's women-owned firms or African-American firms or Hispanic firms. There's different combinations of involvement with the various partners on the team. And that's not enough for us necessarily. In fact, in early January, we intend to do a workshop with all these developers, inviting minority-owned businesses from the area to sit down and hear what it's all about and introduce the developers to these various minority firms. It is so important that the Port Authority be an advocate for this kind of thing and make it easy for the developer to do the right thing. Because I firmly believe that all these developers, and most people want to do the right thing, it's either that they can't because they're coerced into it and then everybody puts on the brakes, or they can't do it because they don't know how to do it. And we have said from the beginning, we are going to become the poster child for how this is handled in a respectable and frankly successful way.
The issue, I think, that is on a lot of people's mind is there's a lot of public money, and we've been talking about that, being put into the banks. Do these development firms actually risk any of their own capital, or are we just paying for them to come in?
Oh my God, no. I mean, the development firms are risking far more of their own capital than the public investment. I mean, as we've said the first time you and I ever talked about this, public investment drives private investment and not the other way around. And I mean, there's no development on the planet where there isn't public money involved, whether that's infrastructure, parking, green space, you name it. But the developers are on the line for, hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of these facilities.
Is the proportion of public to private investment on the banks in proportion to what is happening in other places, or are we out of balance anyway?
If in the banks, we're not out of balance at all. As you know, I have a real job other than this Port Authority stuff. And so I'm fortunate enough to get to see this in a lot of other places. And no, we're not out of balance. I mean, you're looking at a riverfront development that when this is all built out is what, almost $2 billion. Right. So, right now we're talking about $68 million for some garages and some infrastructure stuff.
We only have about a minute left. And final question here, what about sequencing? Where are we in terms of selecting a development team, actually moving forward, actually beginning to
You want to know when there's going to be a tower crane down there?
Yeah.
Moving dirt. Well, the RFPs will go out later this month, and we expect the responses from the developers to be back in early spring. In terms of the phasing and which block starts first, market drives that, construction conditions drive that. The Riverfront Advisors and the Port Authority recommended a certain sequence. The county has an idea for another sequence. The city has an idea for a sequence. So we'll figure out what the right sequence is.
And that all impacts partly that funding issue we started with.
Sure.
When do you think we'll see a crane down there?
We will see some activity down there in 2003, if not late 2002. Damn it.
Okay. Thank you. We'll keep having you back. Stay tuned. After the break, a discussion with the head of the University of Cincinnati Medical Center about the newest development craze, biotech. The news reaches the general public in bits and pieces. Scientists develop genetically altered crops capable of warding off insects and diseases while cutting the use of dangerous pesticides. Other labs experiment with mapping the human genetic code in search of the root causes for a host of maladies that have thus far been untreatable. And of course, there's Dolly, the issue of cloning animals and ultimately humans. Just beyond every scientific frontier that is pushed back by biotech lies patents, new businesses, even new industries and jobs. And it's that economic potential of biotech that has Governor Taft and every other governor and economic development official around the country anxious to make their state the platform for active research. Consequently, the proposal floated this past week for a new statewide Ohio sales tax to generate funding for biotech research. To talk about what biotech is, as well as its potential and limits, I am joined this morning by Dr. Donald Harrison, the Senior Vice President and Provost for Health Affairs at the University of Cincinnati. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Pleased to be here this morning.
First off, even for those of us who try to read and try to keep up with things, what is biotech?
Biotech is really life sciences. It's the things that allow us to create new drugs, to treat various conditions, to put in new devices. It's all of those things that improve the human condition, and that's involving production of devices, use of polymers to build new joints, and this kind of thing.
In one sense, has this been going on for a long, long time? And in the other sense, is there something new about this?
Well, the human genome has opened up many new doors. It's now possible to determine what is causing a specific disease and what gene might be driving that and what protein that gene caused to be synthesized. It's called gene expression. Those proteins are what regulate your body functions, and if they're abnormal, then to create a drug that interrupts that function of that protein or enzyme is important. We can now do that with a lot of precision now that the whole human genome has been cloned.
So that is the sort of major breakthrough that changes not just a little thing, but changes the whole perspective.
This opens up a whole new vista for what people can do in the laboratory, and those products in the laboratory can then be translated in what we call translational research to be of use in people.
Let's talk a little bit about the state of biotech in Cincinnati, and I would presume the center for this is at the University of Cincinnati?
Yes, biotech really starts with basic research, laboratory work. From that laboratory work, products are developed. They have to be tested in then animal models and then in patients. That's called translational research. And then they allow the company to be formed that will ultimately create jobs and bring that product to market. The heart of that is sort of the basic research that goes on to the university and a commercialization plan that allows that to happen in the community. Cincinnati has a major program, certainly within the University of Cincinnati. The medical center is the core of that. The medical center really is the Children's Hospital. It's the 4 health colleges, medicine, nursing, pharmacy, and allied health. And we receive in competition nationally about $180 million worth of research funding. That in itself creates
jobs. So that's that basic research phase that you're
talking
about. That's right.
Now, then we have an instrument on campus there called BioStart. It's an incubator. Once these concepts are developed and available, they can then have small company development in this incubator where you might have a company go for a few years. That incubator provides business sense to what people have done with their ideas. It allows it to mature. If it has the capability of growing, then it graduates out and moves to places like Blue Ash and our community.
I mean, the reality is that a lot of people who work in that basic research phase and maybe have the scientific capabilities may not have a clue about business. So the incubator helps them put that part of it together, right?
Right. There are people working in the incubator who provide subsidized business sense to allow that to continue to develop. They know how to help develop venture capital money to allow these business concepts to flourish. And there have been 17 companies established in the incubator in the last 5 years. 5 of those have now graduated and are out of the incubator, and we need to see those flourish in our community.
Do you have any idea how many people are employed by the 17 companies that have been connected with the incubator?
Well, I don't have a full idea. One of the problems is when you move that next stage, you need major funding. And 2 of those companies receive their major funding, one from California and one from Boston. The people who fund them also want to be on the board and influence the companies. So those 2 companies, because they couldn't get venture funding here in Cincinnati, moved out of the state and moved to those 2 places. The other, I'm involved in one of those, and in fact, we are still in the state. We have funding from California, but from time to time it's mentioned that they want us to think about moving.
Do a company that maybe the basic research was done at the University of Cincinnati, and maybe the incubator phase was done at this BioStar, the incubator on campus, but then it graduates and it goes someplace else. Does the university get any money back, or is that just money out?
No, the university, generally any research that's funded with federal money, which almost 150 million of the 180 that I referred to is, the ownership of the intellectual property, the patents in other words, they're owned by the university. The university then licenses that with royalty streams coming back to the university, which helps fund more research. The university gets almost $5 million a year in royalty streams at the present. That actually makes us about 30th nationally, and we've done pretty well. We're the largest in Ohio.
Let me ask this question. If you weren't the head of the medical center at the University of Cincinnati, and you had some general, if I would ask you, what are the places that are most forward-looking and aggressive in the area of biotech development, where are they in the United States?
Well, the two greatest areas of all of this for many years back have been the California area and the Boston area. And San Diego is probably the city that's the hotbed of it present. But a lot of states are trying to be involved in this. And 3 states that are much smaller than Ohio are investing heavily in this, and they've had great success. Georgia, North Carolina, and Maryland. And they're really pushing their whole biotech initiative. Those states are pouring money into building the infrastructure to allow this development at the basic level to occur, and also in the commercialization process. And you see that now as growing areas where the biotech is going to succeed.
Okay, one of the proposals is out there that we've, at least for me, I've only first heard about it in the past week, is proposal for a statewide pool of money. And I called it a sales tax. I'm not sure. It's a bond, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bonded issue.
It's a bond issue. Okay. Yeah. How would that money actually be used? What would it do for a place like UC?
Well, let me outline where we are presently. Ohio gets about $400 million a year in NIH. NIH is the National Institutes of Health. That's who funds all this basic biomedical research. That puts us 12th or 13th, while our population is 7th. So we're far behind in how far we should be, how much of that money we should be getting. We believe that Ohio needs to be getting at least 800 million of that per year. Now that would create another, we figure that presently this research creates about 7,500 jobs, high-paying, high-tech jobs in Ohio. We figure you'd be doubling that to about 15,000. But more importantly, the business spin-offs that would occur. So how would that money be spent? What we have to do is recruit about 1,000 new researchers, because each researcher is able to get about $400,000 per year in these kind of federal grants. We have to compete with the Californias, the North Carolinas, the Hopkins, the Harvards, the Stanfords.
Does that mean we have to steal some of the people who are already in these other places?
Absolutely. Almost everyone's driving to have the best people. Just like having a great baseball team, we've got to recruit those people. You have to get them, have the laboratories for them. A person getting that much research requires about 2,000 square feet of laboratory space. They require technicians that need to be supported until they get all of their grant funding. So the money would be spent in 4 ways. It'd be spent to build these facilities. We would need to build 3 major research buildings, probably at the major research universities. Case Western Reserve, Ohio State, and the University of Cincinnati are the 3 major universities that get this federal funding. That federal funding that's about 90% of what comes to Ohio. You build a major research building in each of those and allow them to recruit these scientists. So that would be one way money was spent. Second is the recruitment of these people. This gets them started, core laboratories for them to work in. Second, we need more incubator time. We need a ability to commercialize that research, and we need a clear pattern, better intellectual property acquisition, better transfer of that intellectual property. And finally, we need the ability to have venture capital in Ohio. Not that that would come from state money, but you would attract that here by allowing people to develop these businesses.
We only have about 30 seconds left. Given the economic situation on the state level right now, what's the likelihood of a bond issue being on the ballot
I think it's absolutely essential. If Ohio doesn't step forward now, the largesse of NIH will go away, and Ohio will really sink into the morass of
So it's
loss.
not just a choice of growing, it's also a choice of falling.
It's a choice of falling far behind. So I think we need to do it now.
You're going to be back, and we'll follow this. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the women and the men shaping our community for the future. Have a good week.